Greetings, citizens of the world, we are Anonymous.
The summer of 2011, and the world is getting to grips with a new form of protest.
The revolution has begun. We are Legion. We do not forgive, we do not forget.
A revolution conducted online by hackers, people who carry out attacks in cyberspace.
It's not a game. This is a crime. It's purely using technology to commit that crime on a global scale.
I don't feel like a criminal. I just feel like a kid that put his creativity in the wrong place at the wrong time.
This online revolution involved attacks on computer systems and on websites, rather than fighting for a cause in the real, physical world. Carried out by so-called hacktivists, leaderless but grouped under the name of Anonymous. Then LulzSec appears. A jokey splinter group, more chaotic than Anonymous.
LulzSec was like a rock band. LulzSec members were like rock stars. They were entertainers.
Like Anonymous, they said they wanted information on the internet to be free. But LulzSec also wanted to have a laugh. So was LulzSec just a bunch of cyber jokers, or a threat that had to be taken seriously? In an exclusive interview, we speak to one of the group's key members before he was imprisoned. A rare glimpse into the secretive world of hacking. The LulzSec hacking group held the online world in thrall as they went on a hacking rampage. The name LulzSec, or Lulz Security, derives from lulz being internet slang for the laughs. They caused chaos, hacking media companies, security firms, police, the CIA and the FBI. There were many LulzSec associates, but half a dozen or so central characters, each with their own role and online name. In the real world, the members of LulzSec never met. They lived continents apart. This small group of individuals, most of whom have now been arrested, lived out their lives online, in constant communication. They adopted colourful characters as they crashed websites and published the data they hacked. The oldest of the group was Hector Monsegur, known online by the nickname Sabu. He was New York-based and the closest the group had to a leader. Mustafa Al-Bassam was the youngest, just 16, based in the UK and known online as T-Flow. Ryan Ackroyd, also from the UK, adopted the online persona of a teenage girl called Kayla. AV Unit, the identity of whom remains a mystery to this day. And finally, the group's head of comms and unlikely PR man, Jake Davis, who online became the witty and cocksure Topiary. This is the first time he's agreed to a television interview.
Aspects of myself went into it, but it was a exaggerated version of the things I couldn't really be. It was quite a, I think Topiary is a lot, he's a lot more confident than I am, certainly, but I am speaking as myself, truthfully, to you, in a real-life environment rather than behind an alias on the internet.
At the time, Jake was 17 and living on the remote Shetland Islands off the north coast of Scotland. His parents split up when he was very young, and then, when Jake was just 13, his stepfather died in a car crash. After being bullied at school, he became a near recluse. His mother and brother moved to England, and Jake was alone. He rejected the real world for internet chat rooms.
I literally just made friends online, and the computer screen was like a God's eye view of the world to me. So just utter isolation, day and night, So of course sleeping patterns all over the place, and when your friend base is existent only through the internet, time zones become kind of irrelevant. Because there was no stimuli during the day outside, there were no social groups I would hang out with. I would sleep during the day and feel no responsibility. So it was a very limited world. It's a world that you can see and hear, but that's it. You can't touch the internet. You can't feel it. You can't kind of smell it or taste it or sense it. So it's a world kind of devoid of empathy. It was my world. It was a very cynical world, and I became a very cynical person within that world.
Parmi Olsen is a journalist who wrote about many of LulzSec's attacks when they were at their most active. She's since spoken to the key players about the time they spent planning and discussing hacks online in chat rooms, like-minded communities where conversations are fast-moving, often intense and introspective.
It can be very, very lively one minute, but also very negative the next. There can be a lot of backbiting and bitchiness and paranoia as well. And it's just very, very up and down. Like online, if you imagine the kind of office politics that you experience in a normal office, multiply that by 3, and that's what you get in Anonymous. And so these guys get very, very stressed and very emotional, even though they're just sitting there. The thing they're being connected to is an incredibly dramatic world. It's a frenetic amount of activity and stuff going on in their heads.
The attacks took 2 forms. The first evaded an organisation's security to infiltrate, then extract data, sometimes confidential, and publish that for the world to see. This is traditional hacking. The second, known as a DDoS attack, or distributed denial of service, marshalled thousands of computers to take aim at a website and flood it with requests for information until it crashed. The group discussed these attacks in hidden parts of the internet that most of us aren't even aware of.
Here in London, there might be some areas which have more crime or are somehow shady. They typically don't go there unless you have a reason. And the same thing applies to the internet. There are shady areas of the internet, areas you have no idea even exist. Areas completely outside of the normal web where you surf with your browsers, services and systems where you need special clients to even see the discussions going on in them. Which means normal people have no idea this dark side of the internet exists, but it certainly does. And because internet is just a reflection of the real world, it probably always will.
LulzSec's targets were an eclectic mix, only loosely political, often prankish in nature. Members of the group have been indicted in the US for allegedly stealing and publishing a database containing details of 70,000 potential contestants for the X Factor. In the UK, some have pleaded guilty to hacking the website of the Sun newspaper and replacing its front page with a false story that Rupert Murdoch had been found dead in his topiary garden. Their name is also linked to attacks on Sony when the games company was under fire from hackers across the internet, angry about what they saw as the company's blasé approach to keeping people's data secure. The way the group spoke to the world, directed by Jake Davis, defined the personality of LulzSec, and there was an element of spin too.
There were a lot of other splinter groups like LulzSec that were around at the time and that have come out since then that didn't get anywhere near the kind of notoriety that they did. It's not just because LulzSec was great at communicating and was witty and funny on Twitter and put out prolific press releases and chatted to journalists and whatever else. It was also because they did have 1 or 2 very, very skilled hackers within the group. So it was a confluence of circumstances and this meeting of minds and a small group of people who had actually just met each other a few months prior and kind of were getting closer and closer until they made this, what they thought was an elite team to inspire Anonymous. But definitely the issue of communicating and PR was so important in creating this mirage almost of a dangerous organization, a threatening group.
LulzSec had grabbed the attention of the world's media with the taunting, light-hearted tone of the publicity around their attacks. Taking a shot at big companies was one thing, but in amongst their targets were several law enforcement agencies. On their Twitter feed, LulzSec boasted about bringing down a website linked to the FBI. They'd crashed the CIA's home site and sought to embarrass those whose job it is to investigate cybercrime, the UK's Serious Organised Crime Agency, SOCA, by forcing their website offline.
Time to strike back, infiltrate.
Attacking the police was a step too far, according to Mikko Hyppönen, who spent the last 20 years unpicking computer viruses and tracking down hackers.
It's quite clear that the law enforcement in the United States and here in Europe took LulzSec personally. For a reason, because LulzSec was very brazenly going after law enforcement targets. They were attacking law enforcement sites in the United States, they were recording their conf calls between Europe and USA.
Hello? Yeah, hello, sure, yeah?
Hey, it's Bruce.
Bruce, how you doing?
This is what he's talking about, a hacked conference call between Scotland Yard and the FBI, recorded and published in the name of Anonymous.
So we've set back the further arrests of Kayla and T-Flow.
The fact that the world could tune in and listen to the cybercrime teams as they discussed pursuit of LulzSec was acutely embarrassing for law enforcement.
I just saw the information about the big ACPO cyber conference in Sheffield.
Oh yes, yeah, you're going to be able to come?
I think so, yeah. I've never been to Sheffield.
You've missed nothing. It's a colour.
Really?
Oh yeah, I'm afraid so. It's not exactly a jewel in England's crown.
The police in that call did meet up in Sheffield, where local academics aim to encourage young enthusiasts to take an interest in computer coding by developing their own computer games.
Everything else that we'd want. So what we need to do is we need to go into here and we need to pull an object out and put it into our scene. So,
Here at Sheffield Hallam University's Games Britannia event, schoolchildren are being taught how to use standard game software to create their own worlds. One of the academics at this same university briefed the police on cybersecurity and was then asked to get involved in the LulzSec case.
Yeah, this is a more visual interpretation of the data, which allows us to know where the attacks are coming from. This is basically the hackers have managed to breach the system using a buffer overflow attack. They're just showing off.
Dr. David Day was unpicking evidence on the computer hard drive of T-Flow, one of the most technically competent of the LulzSec hackers. How good a hacker was he?
I'd say he was very good. He was using the appropriate tools for performing this kind of activity. He was well versed in their use, and he knew how to write code and write malicious scripts to a level, you know, which far exceeds what I would have imagined somebody of his age to be able to do.
Were you surprised when you did eventually find out just how young he was?
I was very surprised, yes. I wouldn't have imagined somebody that age would have had the time to accumulate that level of knowledge and expertise.
Did you yourself find you were becoming immersed in this world?
Totally absorbed, yeah, for probably about 2 weeks. I didn't do an awful lot else. I spent a lot of my time hauled up. I was working long hours. On occasions where I found something that I found exciting, I got animated and maybe stayed up, you know, to the early hours of the morning, or sometimes in the night I'd wake up with an idea and have no option other than to get up and test my hypothesis. I mean, I totally understand you know, how hacking can be thrilling, and I can identify with the thrill of the challenge of it and the sort of emotional reward that you get when you're successful.
But the challenge is to convince young people that being on the right side of the internet can be just as much fun as the dark side, and that the consequences of hacking for what might appear to be a laugh are not worth it. Jake pleaded guilty to a charge related to the UK's Serious Organised Crime Agency, or SOCA, which he says is based on a 2-line exchange in a chat room.
That one page was the first thing that was presented to me in terms of police trying to give evidence. That was it. That was my involvement. This one conspiracy to commit computer misuse against soccer in 2 lines of text on a computer screen that I typed thousands, tens of thousands of lines of computer text a day, and these 2 little lines that I probably wrote 7 seconds apart, these stick with you, and these are worth a separate charge that's punishable by up to 10 years in prison.
I suppose it doesn't matter though whether it's 2 lines or 10 lines. It's what it says.
I completely agree. I could have said don't go after soccer, but I said go after soccer. So,
do you regret getting involved with the soccer situation?
I regret 95% of the things I've ever typed on the internet, especially including those 2 or 3 lines of just, sure, let's go after these people, why not kind of thing. It can't hurt, and obviously it did hurt both the soccer and myself and others.
We still come across individuals who don't appreciate that committing an attack on the internet is exactly the same as committing a physical type of attack. It has real world impact at the end of the day, whether that's financial loss, reputational harm or emotional harm. It's not a game. This is a crime. It's purely using technology to commit that crime, which, as we've seen, actually makes the attacks easier to commit on a larger scale and on a global scale.
You get to explain that in the day of judgment, and your destruction is imminent.
I know. Am I going to hell?
At the time of the attack on the UK's Serious Organised Crime Agency, or SOCA, the identities of the LulzSec crew were still unknown, but it's possible that Jake had already let down his defences. His voice was clearly recognisable in a live hack performed on a US radio show against the Westboro Baptist Church, an outspoken fundamentalist Christian group with anti-gay views.
And I think if you check downloads.Westboro Baptist Church right now, you'll see a nice message from Anonymous.
This was early 2011, just as LulzSec was getting started.
That appears to be from Anonymous on downloads.westborobaptistchurch.com.
At that point, having no real identity or being quite carefree, you just think, I'll do it, why not? What's the worst thing that could happen? Unfortunately, the worst thing that could happen is it gets 500,000 views in about 12 hours and is on the front page of YouTube. I felt extremely vulnerable at that point, because it felt like the barrier had broken between the internet and real life. I had like a cold sweat after that, just what did I just do kind of thing.
Tonight, inside the almost impenetrable world of the hackers who claim...
On the 24th of June 2011, on the BBC's Newsnight programme, we spoke to Topiary in an online chat room. He came across as his usual confident online self. In reality, he told us, he was in turmoil, and now describes that day as a turning point. That's because earlier on that Friday, in the US, LulzSec members had attacked the Arizona State Police in protest against tough new laws on immigration. They released private intelligence material, names, addresses and phone numbers of officers and the content of emails.
The Arizona police hack was the big turning point for myself and various others that just thought this hack has gone way too far. This isn't there's no point to this thing, it's just harming police officers. This doesn't A, entertain anyone, B, help anyone anywhere. I decided, well, I'm not this person that the media kind of dictating the narrative of. I'm just literally just some kid in a bedroom. I decided just to leave it, just to cut everything off, shut down my laptop lid for once, and just live out a simple, normal teenage life and get into college. So I found it extremely hard to get this across to other hackers.
The group was falling apart, and unbeknownst to the world, America's Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, had a new weapon. Just prior to the Arizona hack, one of the LulzSec founders and the closest the group had to a leader, Hector Monsegur, known online as Sabu, had been arrested. At the time, he was living in New York and responsible for his 2 young nieces. Reports suggest he was fearful of what might happen to them if he was imprisoned. For some 10 months, he turned informer for the FBI.
I had my suspicions after he had disappeared from the internet for, I think, around 24 hours, and had come back to the internet and was beginning to act a little bit what some would describe as different. Obviously, if your house has just been raided by the FBI, you're going to, even in that emotionless state of chat room text, you're going to not be able to uphold the same, by force of the FBI, the same personalities. So there were a few that just suspected immediately within the first 10 minutes that why are we speaking to this person? Why are we allowing him to goad us into hacks? There must be something going on here. But it was that kamikaze thought, well, who cares if he is? The FBI are in America, and I thought, well, they wouldn't do that. That's the kind of stuff that happens in Hollywood films.
And we know who you are, and we know where you live, and we...
Jake was arrested in the UK on July the 27th, 2011. His last tweet as topiary read, "You cannot arrest an idea."
You're obviously a bright person. You told us you were isolated, but you must have been able to think through that there would be consequences.
At the time, to put in context, I was 17, 18 years old, quite mentally unstable at the time, in a very bad place, and at times I could see through the kind of haze of internet, the kind of suppressed everything else, into, yes, seeing there would be consequence, but it was more a case of, who cares if there's consequence? I want to live in the moment and just enjoy this glimmer of attention.
Experts have little doubt that LulzSec will be remembered. They achieved a rare thing, notoriety online and in the real world. In the brief time they existed, what they called their 50 days of lulz. But the outcome has not been a happy one for any of the LulzSec crew. Sabu Hector Monsegur is awaiting trial in the US, charged with crimes that include not just hacking but bank fraud. In theory, he could face 124 years behind bars. Earlier this year, Tiflo Mustafa Al-Bassam was given a 20-month suspended sentence in the United Kingdom, so will serve no time but will have to carry out 300 hours of unpaid work. Also in the UK, Kayla, Ryan Ackroyd, was jailed for 30 months and is expected to serve half of that. AV unit remains unidentified.
Anyone committing a crime, whether it's a physical crime or a crime on the internet, potentially a global, using global associates or infrastructure abroad, using proxies to hide their identity, that will be investigated. They will be arrested and they will be prosecuted, and that's the message that needs to go out there. We will work with our global partners and industry to bring these individuals to justice.
When you look at groups like Anonymous or LulzSec, this is not our main enemy. Yes, they broke the law. Yes, they should be punished. But I'm much more worried about organized criminal gangs from Russia, from Ukraine, from Romania, from China, from Brazil. Gangs which are actually stealing money. Gangs which are actually making millions with their attacks. I've spoken to many hackers who've been caught. Many of them feel they could have been really useful in securing systems, but for a reason or another they went to the wrong path, or they didn't have the opportunities, or they made some mistakes. But the same thing they keep telling me the same thing over and over again. If they could change what happens, they would rather be on the other side. They would rather be on our side.
So should we be trying harder to steer young people away from the seemingly glamorous world of hacking and harnessing their skills?
The irony is, we need the people who have the skill sets and the kind of personalities that enjoy hacking to come over and join us in the forensic side and the intrusion detection side. We need people with their kind of skills and abilities and with their desire for puzzle solving to be on the other side of the fence.
Do you have a message for people who might look at what you've done and in some way copycat that situation?
I hope I've not resulted in copycats. If you have that passion to do something, to outlet your creativity, and you have nothing else to do, try to find something beyond the front door rather than get sucked into the computer world. Because if you get sucked into the computer world, you get dependent on it. If you're dependent on it, it's very hard to say no to some things that you will later come to regret.
Jake Davis was given a 24-month sentence. He'd already been under police restrictions which counted against this time, so is reaching the end of some 38 days imprisonment. Some LulzSec members in the UK, including Jake Davis, have been indicted in the US, though so far there's been no request for extradition. LulzSec may have thought of themselves as latter-day pirates whose online antics highlighted the inadequacies of internet security professionals. Prosecutors saw LulzSec differently, as a cowardly and vindictive group at the cutting edge of cybercrime, whose comeuppance, they say, should warn other cyber criminals that they are not invincible.